Bonjour tout le monde, this is John from the Operations family. Thanks a lot for watching this video. If you'd like to join our community, feel free to visit our website operations.family and apply. We'd love to have you on board. The interview was organized by Palette, a new sales platform that simplifies and automates sales commissions. If calculating sales commissions is taking too much of your time, or if you'd like to better explain to the sales team how commissions are calculated with real-time dashboards, Palette is directly synchronized with your CRM and other data sources to crunch the numbers and calculate commission payouts. Visit palettehq.com for more information. And now, without further ado, let's hear Etienne Luneau, the head of business operations at Algolia, explain how Algolia built its organization to support their massive product-led growth. Hello, Etienne. How are you doing?
Hey, Etienne. Very good. How are you?
Great, doing great. Thank you so much for doing this interview with me. Second time we have someone from Algolia coming. The first time was with Gaëtan Gachet, the Chief Strategy Officer, which was a massive success, over 70,000 views, something like this.
If we can reach the same level.
I bet you'll do. So Etienne, super cool career. Especially, I saw that you worked for 3 years for Beam Analytics, a company that I followed back at the time, which got acquired by Zendesk, and you worked for Zendesk 3 years after that. After Zendesk, you joined another successful scale-up, Algolia, and you've been working at Algolia for the past 3 years as the Senior Director of Business Operations. So that's really cool. Can you explain to me what does a Senior Director in Business Operations do? What's your role? What are your objectives for 2021?
Yeah. So BizOps can be different from one organization to the other. The common thread, though, is that BizOps is a function that's here to support the growth and enable the scale in a given company. And so that can be seen as both internally and externally. So some of the key pillars and key focus areas under business operations today at Algolia are business systems and processes, data analytics, and then pricing and packaging. And obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious for everybody, but business operations is by nature a very much cross-functional team and organization. And so we work with product, we work with sales, we work with the other ops team, we work with marketing, product marketing. So very, very much cross-functional and collaborating with a lot of different teams within the company.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you ask about some of the objectives for 2021 specifically, right? So for us, and for me, it's going to be, hey, how do we support the move to becoming a multi-product company, right? And that's going to enable us to accelerate our growth and scale. So that's going to be the key focus for this year.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was going to talk about the cross-functional part of your job, because every time I talk to someone at Algolia, they say we work with every teams, which sounds like an evidence, but it isn't. And I think Algolia was very good at making teams work together, especially teams that do not necessarily work well together. For example, like there's always this split between sales and engineering, for example. And I think Algolia and the Algolia culture made it work very well.
Yeah, I agree. It's part of the culture. It's also part of the overall alignment. And when we know we have all the same goals, then it's much easier for people to collaborate and work together.
Yeah. Today, the topic is about product-led growth. And I know you're an expert about that. But before, I'm just going to give a quick introduction of Algolia and how the pricing works, because I know that we had the interview with Gaëtan. It was a feedback that was shared to me. And I think it's very important to understand product-led growth, to understand the Algolia pricing. So I'm going to share my screen with you for a second and give a quick introduction of Algolia. So Algolia is a search engine as a service, which means that if you'd like to implement a search engine in your website or mobile application, they give you all the tools you need for you to create the search experience. And their goal is basically to connect one intent, someone looking for content on your website, to content, and do it in a way that is seamless for the users. So here, for example, if I search for Women's Day, which happened yesterday, the engine is going to provide results. And if you look at the developer console, let me, and the network, you see that every time I'm typing, you see Algolia queries being set to Algolia, which means that every time I click on a keyboard, there's a trigger sent to Algolia, and the trigger is a search API, a search unit, a search operations, which brings me to the Algolia pricing. The Algolia pricing is really product-led. So here in the standard plan, you pay $1 per unit per month, 1 unit being, I think it's 1,000 search operations, which means that the more the users in your platform are going to use the search bar, the more you're going to pay for Algolia. And that's really key to understand product-led growth, because the growth of Algolia is led by how users and end users use the end product.
Yeah, and so if I may, in the product-led growth or PLG context, the way you think about pricing specifically is how you very tightly align the value that you're delivering to your customers with your price. And for us, after quite a few iterations, we landed on this model, which I'm very familiar with. I'm one of the architects there, where we believe that from our customer standpoint, right, the more users they get and the more response they're returning, then those response or those as part of those searches, the more relevant they are, the more value we're bringing, because that's going to drive retention. That's going to drive the fact that the user is going to spend more time consuming content on your website or your app, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the proxy that we leverage today. There are a few other tactics that you can leverage when you think about pricing and packaging as part of the PLG strategy, but I think we can cover that a little bit later throughout our conversation.
Yeah. How about we start by defining product-led growth?
Yeah. Everything seems to be a PLG or product-led growth today, which is fascinating. And first and foremost, it's not necessarily something new, right? There has been a renewed focus on it, because a lot of organizations have been able to prove that once you adopt product-led growth strategy, you actually grow faster. And so in that context, product-led growth is a model where the focus is put on the end user, right? And as company, we would rely on the product itself to be the primary driver for the initial customer acquisition, the conversion to a paid plan, right? Or whatever you're converting to, right? The expansion and the retention. So when you think about the customer life cycle, right? That's putting product at the core of the user experience, right? And making sure that you're able to very much understand at each one of those key milestones what's happening in the product.
Okay, so if we are, could you name a few examples of product-led companies that are really successful?
Yeah, well, Twilio, Snowflake, Slack, Calendly, like you have plenty out there, right?
Okay.
That truly understood, like there is a virality aspect of it, right? Just like, hey, how can I get access to the product and just be able to grow from there in a viral motion, right? Without necessarily having to talk to sales all the time or ask for more things, right? It's and I think we'll cover that a little bit later as well. It's a directly in the product, what can I do to be able to get to value, right? And then grow from there.
Was Algolia always a product-led company, or did it become a product-led company?
I'll say that we started very much so as a product-led company, and it was not necessarily, well, I was not part of the team back then, but I think it was also part of the, hey, we don't have all the resources, right? Gaetan was the one salesperson, right? So you can't talk to everybody. So how do you address everybody? How do you address all your users? Well, you make that experience in the product, and that's a way to scale very quickly. And I'll say that over the past few years, so we started definitely with a product-led growth mindset, I'll say. Over the past few years, we lost a bit of that focus, and last year we decided to renew that focus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that started with the major iteration that we've done from a pricing and packaging standpoint.
Okay, but it's possible to transition to being a product led.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see more and more more and more companies that are doing that shift, right? And that's going to look very different from one company to the other. That also, I want to be clear, that doesn't mean that you get rid of sales or marketing, not at all. It's just that the way you engage with your user is going to be a little bit different.
Okay, so let's actually start with that, with how you engage with the user. And I think the first part of engaging with the user is the onboarding experience. What happens when someone goes to your website and clicks on sign up? What happens then is the onboarding process. Could you tell us a little more about that? Is it really critical for a product-led company?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And if you think about it, right, you'll know that if you put yourself in the shoes of a user, because we're using plenty of tools every day, whether it's as a consumer or as a buyer within our companies, right? Your first, if the premise is that with PLG, you're going to be delivering value in the product, then that means your first interaction is going to be within the product, right? And you've got one chance to make a good impression, and that first impression, it's going to most likely going to happen during your initial onboarding, right? So that's where it's becoming more and more critical, because the way you're going to be able to showcase your value, that has to be part of your initial onboarding.
Yeah, I think I remember the first time I discovered Amazon a couple of years ago. Was a friend of mine who showed me the one-click purchase. And we wanted to purchase something, and we did it in like 20 seconds with a one-click purchase. And that really amazed me of how fast they could deliver the object to you. And we didn't talk to a sales rep when going to Amazon.
Yes.
Like we went to Amazon, we purchased the product, and that's it. And no salespeople popped up saying, "Hey, do you want to schedule a 30 minutes call with me and discuss pricing?"
Now, what's also fascinating with this is and we don't necessarily always recognize the product where we have a good experience, but we know when we have a shitty experience, right? You can get a sense, like, it's just like good search and bad search, right? You get a sense when your experience is not matching the expectation that you're getting, and those expectations are set today by the Google of the world, by the Amazon, by the Apple, right? It's frictionless. It's very much focused on the user for us to have a delightful experience, right? And remove a lot of the friction. And the expectation as consumer are set now at such a high level that as user, when we buy software and when we try software, we are expecting that similar frictionless user-focused experience.
How do you know the users are having a great experience? Because as a user, I know when I have a shitty experience. As a company, though, it's not very easy to learn what's the experience.
So that takes a lot. First, that takes a lot of iteration. Second is you need to be able to have to capture some data. Not all that stuff has to be quantitative data. You can also do user research, where you spend a bit of time looking at people interacting with your product. And we do that at Algolia. We do have a team that's dedicated to this, which is great work, because again, you can get very quality feedback on, hey, what did you click here or there, and explaining and getting a sense of where people are getting the value. So it's a combination of quantitative data, if you're able to capture it, right? User research, and a lot of experimentation and trial and error, right? You're not going to get it right the first time. You're going to have to iterate and build on top of your learnings.
Do you have a North Star metric where you know, okay, if we have, for example, this amount of conversion on our website from visit to sign up, we know we have a good onboarding experience?
Yeah, and so we do. We've set some North Star metrics based on the different milestones I described earlier, right? We do have one that's looking at the initial onboarding, and for us, it's going to be, hey, you went through all the steps, you started configure, and you get to what we call the moment of the initial valorization. I think we'll talk a little bit about that. And for us, that defines, hey, from there, we should start to see some operations or API calls running through the tool, right? And that's how we define what our product qualified lead is, and that's one of our key metrics.
Okay, so you split the onboarding process into multiple steps, and for each step, you have a North Star metric that you want to improve, but ultimately, you know if the user is liking the product because you'll see search operations and product metrics go up.
Yes.
You talked about the aha moment. What is that?
So, and again, in that context of product-led growth, where most of your users are going to come to your website and they're going to learn what you do from your website, right? And then on that website, you pitch a value prop, right? You say, hey, we're the greatest tool for this or that, and here's how we do it, right? The initial valorization of the aha moment is as part of that onboarding, right? You need to start to show them pretty quickly that you're able to deliver on what you said you were doing and that you're the value we're going to bring to that user, right? And so for us specifically, right, if I take us as an example, hey, we say, hey, you can build fast, super relevant search experience, right? So for us, it's going to be how quickly do we get you to be able to type something in a search bar, right? And that's going to return results. And that's, you know, if we're able to deliver that in the onboarding, we've checked the box and we've been able to prove to you as a user that yes, you're able to quickly get there and get the value we said we're going to be able to deliver for you. And so that's going to change. That's going to be very different from one product to the other, obviously. At Zendesk, for example, where I was before joining Algolia, right? It was the initial first few interactions or ticket you were going to create, right? That was the then you can show that yes, the ticketing tool is working. I got a request coming in. I'm able to see it come through, and that's when you realize the value.
Okay, so the aha moment is the moment you realize that the software is bringing value and solving the pain that initially brought you to creating an account.
Exactly.
And you have to deliver that value as quickly as possible, but the amount of time can depend on the website. And it's not necessarily related actually to the amount of time. It could be to the amount of granular actions a user must take before realizing the value.
Yes. That being said, and I know I don't have the stats on top of my head, but you've got the time to value or to that initial valueization, it's getting shorter and shorter because we're all impatient. We want it. We want it now, right? So
yes,
you don't have 2 days to get there. It's very much in the moment.
When you're buying an item on an e-commerce website, the time to value is extremely short, I guess. When you're shopping for an online search as a service API, can you deliver the value in 2 or 3 minutes? You know, like we're talking about a search engine, so like I guess a pretty technical product.
Pretty technical product, but that's where you start now overlapping additional areas of the business. Right? You start bringing in the pricing and packaging, and now that should have an impact there and remove some of the friction in the user experience. So that again, the goal is to get our users to initial valorization to say, hey, yes, this is the right tool for me. Then with us, they've got 14 days to go and continue to try it. During those 14 days, we're going to bring in additional resources. We have a great documentation that's available for people to use. We've got a bit of a guided experience in your trial as well that just showcase where to go and what to do. And then we are going to bring some additional content from our marketing team. And we're also going to bring some additional support and resources from our sales and support teams, right? So that's that combined experience that's hopefully going to help you get to, hey, yes, initial valorization, then we try to answer all of your questions. And then, by the way, in the end, when your trial is up, you've got different paths for you to continue the journey with Algolia, right? And so that could be you decide that, yes, you want to continue to try, but you're not exactly sure of the number of units that you're going to drive because you haven't implemented in production just yet. And so for that, you've got usage-based pricing that's just pay as you go. So you just pay for what you use, right? And you can run on that for a couple weeks or a month or two. And then after you are confident with the level of consumption you're going to have, you can just come back and commit, and you unlock at least minimum 20% discount as you commit. So that's, you think about it through the, it's not just, hey, the onboarding, and then you have to really map the entire journey, right? And start to think and adjust the different steps in that journey, and also map out the resources that you want to bring to your user throughout that journey. So it has to be very much of a cohesive approach, right? And that's what I like about product-led growth. It just like, it doesn't stop at the initial purchase, right? It's also like, hey, then how do we continue to understand what's happening with the user, right? All of a sudden, maybe their usage goes up. How do we bring some of those additional resources to support them as their usage goes up, and help them and guide them through what is the next level of commitment in terms of usage that they need to make to get the most out of our platform.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. There's actually a pretty strong framework you just described. If I had to, I mean, first map the user journey, and for every step in the user journey, have second a set of North Star metrics. And for each step, you have a number of strategies and things that can help you improve the user onboarding, such as great pricing first, great pricing, pricing packages, documentation, guided experience, sending content at the right time, supports and resources at the right time. And I was wondering, is it also helpful to choose your audience? Because I'm wondering, if you have very horizontal product, such as tab form, you're going to get a lot of different users in your platform, which might be super hard to tailor the onboarding for every user you get, because the product is so horizontal. Whereas if you have a more vertical user base, like targeting retailers or targeting engineers, it's going to be much easier. So did you also choose this strategy of choosing your audience and building for that audience?
Yeah, so it goes into the ideal customer profile, ICP, the right fit from a demographic standpoint. So obviously we do some of that, right? And specifically at Algolia, we know that, hey, like e-commerce solution, this is going to be a great fit for us. And not to be a contrarian, but that being said, though, in the PLG framework and model, right, keep in mind that it's not necessarily where people are coming from and that stuff. Is have they realized initial value, right? And now they continue to realize value throughout using your product. And so what's fascinating to me is that this is also opening the door potentially for you to identify customer profile use cases that you may not have thought about before, right? And so I see also that as that's why I don't want to say, hey, no, just, yeah, buy the books. If you're going to be e-commerce, just focus on e-commerce and that's it. I said in the PLG model, you can open that door a little bit more, right? And start identifying based on data, right? And again, that has to be, you have to see that consistently, but you can start to identify with data. All of a sudden now there's a different user profile that's showing up, a different use case, right? And that can be potentially another thing that you want to start looking into and investigate further. And then that's when from there, user research, pull the data. We already covered that a little bit, but I don't think we need to be that rigid around ICP and fit, because again, in the PLG model, as long as someone realizes some of the initial value, you should be engaging with them and learn from them and see where they came here and what that they're trying to do.
Yeah, a couple of interesting things, because you said the value builds up during the onboarding process, and the amount of value that a user gets is not the same. And also you said a second super interesting thing, which is at the right time, bringing support at the right time, bringing resources at the right time, bringing sales at the right time. And what is the right time? Is it like, do you target the aha moment and wait for the aha moment to happen before bringing in sales, for example? How do you know it's the right time?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And it's still a bit of work in progress for us, actually, because again, we are experimenting and trying things. Whatever you read out there around PLG, the book says, well, a lot of people are saying like only engage when they get to the aha moment. I'm a I'm a big believer on that one specifically, because again, for me, the notion of, or you may have heard that expression before, it's spraying and praying, which is just, or carpet bombing, right? Just sending the same message, cookie cutter message to all of your users as they sign up and all that stuff. I think that era is gone. I think, again, expectation, and you see that as consumer, we're getting recommended content every minute, whether it's on social media, it's recommended to us based on what we've done, right? And so the expectation is just like, hey, for software as well, it's going to be the same experience, right? And so the generic email about, oh, thank you for signing up for a trial. Let me know how I can help you. I think those days are gone, right? And that you need to tailor your messaging, and you also need to tailor when you get in touch with your users. And to me, and I'll just take an example to illustrate that. We do have some of our users that are stumbling a little bit in some of our onboarding, right? So maybe they get stuck with one of the initial steps that we have, which is, hey, for your users to be able to search for things, you need to load those things into an index, right? So that they can be, those objects, those records can be indexed. You can make them searchable, and therefore when your users are searching for them, they can find them, right? Maybe a user is getting stuck at that stage, right? Just like, hey, they've got an issue, they don't have the right file, they don't know how to do this, right? The ideal PLG approach in this instance is you're able to flag that from a data standpoint, that they got stuck at the indexing step. And then from there, you're able to bring automated messaging, and that could be in product or by email or both, right? That's just providing maybe the right link to the documentation or to the video that shows you how to load your index. And guess what? Maybe in that message, you also have a call to action, right? CTA, that just say, hey, talk to one of our product specialists. We're here to help, right? So that, to me, that's the type of experience that we're striving for, and that should be delivered as part of a PLG approach.
Yeah, that's a great one. When I'm building products, I usually try to identify rage clicks. So when someone is killing his mouse because he or she cannot do the thing that they wanted to do online, and it's actually the perfect timing to send a message, say, hey, here's the support, we can help, we can jump on a call with you in the next 5 minutes, because that something's happening like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is also something that we realize that at the end of the trial, not everybody is ready to buy, and so we wanted to make sure we offer a way for people to continue to experience and keep them warm, if you will. And so that's how we came up with the model that we have today, which is both of a trial and a freemium, right? Because we've got a free plan. And there is a reason for that, right? The reason for that, just like, hey, initial user coming through, end of the trial, you're not ready to buy just yet. Why don't you go and continue to use the tool for free for a little while? Once you reach a certain threshold, we'll ask you to obviously to pay, because you're starting to reach more and you require more resources. So we created that for this motion. We also created this for some of our users that at some point decide that maybe they no longer need the tool anymore, right? And so instead of just canceling their account and being gone, right, we have an opportunity to continue to capture their users and continue to nurture them. And then who knows, maybe at some point then come back and they reactivate a paid plan, and then we continue to interact with them and all that stuff. So you have plenty of different options, the context of PLG, how you can drive some of those motions. The key word here is making it as frictionless as possible, right? And the other one is also experimenting and learning, right?
Yeah, making the experience frictionless and iterating. You also talked about freemium versus free trial, which is a big question. And a question that I get often is, should we go for a freemium kind of product or a free trial? And when looking at the Algolia pricing, I saw that actually a lot of features, the same features are included, whether you're on the standard plan or the premium plan. And the one thing that depends is just the volume that you are consuming, which is Very interesting because this model basically allows you to drive a Ferrari no matter if you only need to drive the Ferrari for 1 kilometer, 1 mile, or 100 miles. You can have a budget of $1 or $1,000 or $100,000 and still get the same car. And with Algolia, it's the same. You get the same API, the same features, even though you're paying $1 or $100,000.
Yeah, we'll put a little to continue with that analogy. We'll put a little less gas in the tank when you're on a freemium plan compared to that if you're paying with us. But that's the goal, right? It's just like, hey, we truly believe that you should be able, as a user, right, you should be able to experience most of our features, especially our advanced one, and that for you to be able to get that, it makes sense for us to put most of those features into our premium plan in our free trial, right? Because again, that's the only way we get you to have access to those and experiment the value for yourself. And then you can decide if this is helpful for you or your business, and if you want to convert on that plan or not.
Mm. Yeah, I know a couple of SaaS companies that should do the same thing. I'm not going to names to give names here, but so, and how do you choose between the free trial and the freemium? Because obviously Algolia does both, but should you do you need to do both all the time? Can you choose? And if you can choose, what's the framework to choose between freemium versus free trial?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's always going to be a balance between the resources that you have, because again, those are that means you have to instrument two different of experiences, right? So you have to have the resources to do that. It's also a little bit of the, hey, especially if you're going from a traditional sales and marketing led motion to a product led, you probably don't want to change everything in just overnight, because you won't be able to, and so that's going to take a little bit of an iteration. Freemium is usually a little bit easier, and I say usually, again, it depends on the company and what they do, but a little bit easier because you can take your existing product and you're just capping it based on something, right? Free trial, there is that notion of onboarding experience, and so you have to think through, as we talked a bit earlier, you really have to do a little bit of research and think about, hey, what is that aha moment? How do I build for this? And build a little bit of that motion there, so that it's a little bit more resource intensive. I think ultimately, though, and we touched on that a little bit earlier, is user want to be able to see for themselves, experiment for themselves, right? It's we're in the end user era now, right? And just like, hey, before I'm going to buy something, I need to be able to test it, trial it, and at this point, the best way you deliver on this is with the free trial experience.
Yeah, and the end user area, and I guess it also applies to enterprise companies somehow, because
yes,
Algolia is actually selling to like across the board, selling to SMBs, but also selling $1 million deals to very large enterprise companies. So what you're saying is that the freemium and the product-led strategy and the end user approach is working even when you have an enterprise product.
Yeah, it's working. And look at Snowflake, look at Twilio. Like it is more and more obvious that companies that are somewhat technical, right, or a technical product and or developer focused, right, are able to reach and convert within the enterprise. And there is a reason for that, right? Because as part of the business user or the decision maker, they're going to ask their developers, right? And so, well, I think Gaetan mentioned the book
great
from
book,
Jeff Lawson, Ask Your Developer, right? And you'll see that throughout. That has been very, very successful for Twilio. Just like, yes, you build the trust with the developer community. Not only when those developers are going from one organization to the other, they're carrying their toolbox with them, and so you're part of that too. But more and more companies and leadership and decision makers are asking the developer in the organization, what is the tool that they would recommend? Because at the end of the day, that's the tool they're going to be using, and that they're going to be building for us specifically search and discovery experience on top of. And so that's important as well. Now, that being said, though, you don't approach the same way in the product-led growth. You don't approach the same way the end user that you would approach the decision maker. And so that's where there's still a need for sales and marketing, because you're still going to need to do a little bit of a account-based marketing. You're still going to have to reach out and explain to some of those people what the value is, because they haven't seen Algolia before. They haven't seen your product, right? So that's, for me, that's still very relevant in today's environment. It's just that you've got to tightly integrate that approach with how you engage with your end users, right? And look at Slack, for example, right? Perfect example of a PLG company as well. More targeted, obviously, communication, but towards the business user, right? You don't necessarily need to be super technical to be using Slack, right? But they've been able to build that network effect, right? Well, all of a sudden, or Calendly, right? Same thing. When you send an invite, other people, you're being prompted to use the tool, and all of a sudden you've got 10, 50, 100, 1,000 users, right? And then at some point, the rep is coming in saying, hey, we're noticing that within your company, we've got already 100 users. Let's chat and see how we can help you, whether it's a little bit of a discount on your commitment, or it's how do we help organization to scale with their communication for Slack, for example, right? So there is still, for me, it's still very much a need for sales and marketing. It's just the way they are embedded into that experience, or that the way we follow up with customers, it's a little bit different compared to what we used to.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because if I had to sum up what you what you said, and I'll try it, but basically it's assume you're going to need sales, assume you're going to need marketing, but know how to build the two motions: the self-service product-led motion and the direct sales motion. And you're mentioning companies like Slack. If you check the average ACV at Slack is like $3,000 per year, but they are able to sell deals over $100,000. So if I had to put that in a framework, I would say, assume you're going to need sales, assume you're going to need marketing, know how to build the two motions, make sure the ACV can cover any kind of cost of acquisitions for both direct sales, but also for the self-serve tier, and know how to target users and companies that can pay, so that you can sign and have a growth engine that relies on smaller deals, but also you're able to sell deals over $100,000 to larger companies.
And that's exactly right. And that's, so there are a lot of things here, but that's, you're nailed it on the head, right? And it's also knowing when you don't necessarily have to touch the users too much, right? Let them go, and as long as you build that self-serve motion, right? Let them go in and then once they reach a level where you know that, and that's based on data as well, iteration and experimentation, a level that you know at that threshold of usage or revenue, we usually need to engage because there is more things that triggers a lot. Then bring your sales resources, right, and marketing resources, and engage them heavily there, right? Because you know those deals are gonna require more support and all that stuff. And then from a CAC to LTV ratio standpoint, all of a sudden that economically that makes sense for you as a company, because again, you're engaging your resources that are somewhat expensive, right? For the deals that are reaching a size where you know you're not going to push your CAC through the roof.
And who is responsible for revenue in the end? Is this still the sales team entirely?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I'm sure you're right. Through quite a lot of maybe listen to a few podcasts. There are very, very interesting views out there. For us at Algolia, revenue is still owning the entire thing. That being said, though, it's being split now with growth, right? Okay. I know organizations where in the product-led growth motion, product owns a chunk of the revenue, and that does make for a very different experience from a product standpoint, where all of a sudden you're carrying a target, which is interesting model as well. For us at this stage, we decided it's split between revenue and growth.
Okay, revenue and growth, but it could be product managers. Actually, this reminds me of a friend of mine who worked for Datadog, and he was a product manager at Datadog, and actually he was telling me something like, the day I joined Datadog, the VP of product called me. We had a Zoom conversation, and he told me, you have 3 or 4 months to build a product that is going to bring Datadog $5 million in ARR in the next 3 months. If you don't achieve that, you're fired.
It's pretty aggressive, but yeah, we've yeah, you see it every day, right? It's product is taking on, and again, if product is going to own the whole product experience, right? Maybe that makes sense for your organization to give them that target and for them to drive that, right?
Yeah, I'd love to do an interview, I think, with someone from Datadog to see if that's true. Cool. I think I covered all the questions, because if we're saying that sales still have a lot to do, they just need to target the right people. So not talking to anyone, but talking to the people who first want to talk to sales, and second, who are qualified for the sales rep. That's actually a good point. How do you make sure a lead or a prospect or a user is qualified to talk to the sales?
And so that's where you get back in. So depending on what you're targeting, but usually you want to make sure it's been qualified as a product qualified lead, right? So you see that. And then more often than not is it fitting within your ICP and the demographics that you want to go after? And then based on that, you layer on the sales resources. That's how we're approaching it here at Algolia. That being said, you could also be super restrictive there, and then let a bunch of people go to self-serve, as long as you feel that experience, right? And only engage with people that are part of company that are at a given threshold, or specific industries. Like based on your company, you can define that and put some of the thresholds. The thing I'll say though is, and I've said that a few times now, that has to be part of a experimentation and trial and errors, right? And that's where one of the critical aspects of product-led growth comes in, around data, right? And how do you capture some of those data points and understand what's going on and be able to quickly iterate, right? That's another thing, being agile. And because again, the expectation can be that, hey, you're going to get it right from the first attempt. It's never going to be like this, but it's more like, hey, how do you continue to build based on what you learn? And for that, you need to have data. Yeah.
So Algolia is hiring an army of data scientists. Like, who do you hire? How do you build a team for product-led strategies? Who are the profiles?
So different profiles for sure. Today, we've got a lot of the heavy lifting is done by the newly created growth team, and so they're focusing on the user experience, on how to drive conversion and other things. But then again, that's a team effort. It's a cross-functional effort as well. And so yes, on the data side, you need to be able to capture the data points. You need to have, more often than not, have the right tooling in place to be able to capture that. And again, you have the user researchers that also bringing you qualitative information. And so it's very, very much a cross-functional effort where we try to combine the best of breed in terms of tooling, people, skill set to continue to make that experience the best it can be.
What are the typical titles that you find in a growth team?
It depends on what the growth team is focusing on, but you'll find analysts, you'll find people that are dedicated to helping build that initial experience and that framework, right? You'll find user researchers sometimes are under growth, and again, it's always a collaboration, and not, depending on the organization, not everybody is going to be under growth. So very much a cross collaboration and cross-functional effort.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I think we're running out of time. Thank you so much for everything you shared. That was really interesting. Let's finish with the famous 5 questions. So, current or favorite business book, or any kind of book?
A business book I just started. It's called The Product-led Org by Todd Olson, who's the CEO of Pendo. just started now. Very, very interesting. And it's also starting to explain a bit of, hey, that what is it that you need to do from an organization standpoint to get to product-led growth. And then more on the non-business related, I'm just finishing a 3-volume biography of Napoleon from Max Gatto. So that's also a bit of going back to the history of France and some other things.
Nice one. Okay, cool. An executive one should follow or study. Executive or a leader.
Yeah, I was going to say not necessarily an exec.
Can be Napoleon, since you're reading the books.
Not necessarily an exec, but I would recommend for everybody to go and check out the content from the team at OpenView Partners around PLG. They are the one who coined the term, right? That comes from that team. And the quality of the content that they are rolling out is phenomenal. And so everybody interested in learning more about product-led growth, check them out. OpenView Partners.
I'll put the link in the comments.
Yep.
Favorite Twitter or Reddit account to relax, or what do you do to relax?
Yeah, not really relaxing on Twitter or Reddit, to tell you the truth. There's one show on Netflix that I found fascinating. It's called Blown Away. And it's a competition of people that are brewing glass, right? And I just find it fascinating to see how you start from a raw material and how some of those people can create such artistic pieces. It's just phenomenal. So Blown Away on Netflix.
Cool. Yeah, I think we're going to start a new curfew in France, so I have my next show to binge watch. Mm-hmm. Favorite online tool?
Favorite online tool? Superhuman. Superhuman is a email and inbox management, right? To get into the flow. That's one of my go-to.
Worth the money.
Yes, worth $30 per month. Yes.
Who should I interview next?
Let's see. So I'll give you 2 names. Rachel Delacour. She was the CEO at BIME, and now she's started a new initiative around climate change and how companies can help there. So I would suggest that you try to reach out to her. And then on the PLG specifically, Wes Bush is one of those leaders that also has been part of the initial team, communicating more and more and building resources and framework around PLG. So he's the CEO of a company called productled.
Okay, cool. I think I'll probably need an intro, especially for Rachel Delacour. I would actually love, because as I said, I follow Beam Analytics way back when I was a financial analyst, and I got a demo of the product when it first launched. So I would love to actually talk to Rachel about it and about the new initiative she's launching around climate. Cool. Thank you so much, Etienne. That was really cool. And I'll put all the links and all the information you shared. I have like a few pages of notes, so I'll put everything in the comments. And that was really great. So thank you so much for doing that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this video. We'd love to hear your feedback, so feel free to send us a message or ping us directly in the comments. And if you'd like to join our community, feel free to visit our website, operations.family. Cheers.